And partly what those religious stories are trying to relate, to the degree that they can, is that each person has a destiny that's actually crucially important, and that in the pursuit of that destiny they start to see what is associated with the highest orders of meaning. One of the reasons that I believe that each person should take their place in life, and that this is so important for each individual, is that we all have that potential residing within us, and it has the possibility of making the world more like hell or more like heaven. And to the degree that we can have the courage and the faith to manifest that in a positive way, then we tilt everything in a positive direction. And that's not some naive sort of namby-pamby positive direction where everyone's nice to each other all the time. That's like the ongoing march of civilization that makes the world, that feeds people and cures disease and helps take care of children and keeps suffering under bay and keeps malevolence in check. And that's all part of that divine capacity that people have. And religious systems are an attempt to communicate that across the centuries. And it's not an easy thing to divine from them, but it's a very important thing to understand. And I really do believe that you leave a hole in the world if you don't fill it, if you don't fill the space around you with the destiny that's part and parcel of the best part of you. And it's not good. You have to have a sense of, you have to have two senses. You have to have a sense of how terrible the world is and could be. And then you have to decide that you're going to move away from that as much as you possibly can, at least to move away from that. If you have a conceptualization of hell, and to be properly terrified of that, and to understand that that's a place that you can put yourself and drag other people into, and that it's sufficiently real, and that's the proper message of the 20th century. And then to think about how you might improve yourself incrementally so that that probability decreases, and then you can start to develop a vision of what things might look like if they were better, and strive towards that. And partly what I'm doing now is, for me, trying to clarify the relationship between meaning and responsibility, which I think is, of all the things that I've been talking to people about, probably the most useful, to help people understand that you need a meaning in your life to buttress yourself against the tragedy and the malevolence and the betrayal, and that you find that fundamentally in adoption of responsibility. Now that can become excessive, if it's too one-sided and you don't see a part for other people to play. But fundamentally you need to carry a weight that's Sisyphus, and that weight should be something that you truly regard as worth carrying. It justifies the sacrifices, it orients yourself in life, it provides you with a sense of meaning, it constrains your anxiety, gives you a certain amount of dignity, and it puts the world, it moves the world forward in a better manner. And I do believe that each of us every day decide with every decision whether we're going to make the world a better place or a worse place. And so that's meaningful for me. That's the essence of what I believe meaning to be, the instinct that orients you towards proper action in the world. It's the most real thing there is. One of the things that people don't understand too, it's not laid out very clearly, is that a virtuous path, so that would be one that's oriented to some higher order goal, is a lot more difficult and requires a lot more courage and discipline and strength than an impulsive criminal path. Even though there's a certain romance that's associated with that, that's probably better than hiding in your mother's basement, but that doesn't mean it's the highest order way that you can possibly be. And so part of orienting yourself in the world is to heed that call to adventure, and to try to make the adventure as difficult as you can manage, and as productive in consequence as you can manage.
You have written a book and done a series of lectures that have become embraced around the world. Some people don't get lucky breaks like
That's for sure. Some people just die, and horribly. Yeah, life's rough, no doubt about it. And if good luck comes your way, then you should be grateful for it. And if happiness manages to manifest itself, you should be grateful for that too.
But how do you give a personal responsibility message while taking account that for some people it's harder to take personal responsibility and the deck is stacked against them?
Well, I think the deck is stacked against everyone to some degree, because life is very difficult and we all die. But some people do have it harder than others. And all of us have it very hard at some times in our lives. It's like, well, what's the alternative? You take responsibility for that and try to struggle uphill, because the alternative makes everything worse. It's not like it's fair. I know perfectly well that people have brutal lives. I've been a psychotherapist for 20 years. I've seen things you can't imagine, horror shows that you can't fathom, and people who have been hurt in so many ways, so many dimensions. It's like, bitter? Should they be bitter? Should they be resentful? Should they become violent? These things don't help. They have to struggle uphill despite their excess burden. And it's responsibility, not guilt. It's not necessarily their fault.
One of the things that has just blown me away in the last year, because I've talked to lots of people live, but also lots of people online. But it's more obvious live, and it's obvious in this theater as well, is that I've gone around and spoken, and a large proportion of my audience has been young men, under 30, something like that. And I've spoken to them a lot about responsibility. And what's so odd about this is that of all the things that I've spoken about, because I can see the audience and I can feel how the audience is reacting, because I'm always paying attention to all of you insofar as I can manage that. So I get some sense of how what I'm saying is landing, which you have to do if you're going to speak effectively to people. And what happens is, if I talk about responsibility, is everyone is silent, just like they are now. Silent and not moving, right? Focusing, attentive. Say, pick up your responsibility. Pick up the heaviest thing you can and carry it. And the room goes quiet and everybody's eyes open. And I think, that always makes me break up. I don't know why. I was speaking to an English journalist today. He was going to write an article in Spectator magazine, and I was talking about this. And at the same point in the discussion, I had the same emotional reaction. I don't really understand it. I think there's something about it that's so crucial, because, we've been fed this unending diet of rights and freedoms, and there's something about that, there's something about that that's so pathologically wrong. And people are starving for the antidote, and the antidote is truth and responsibility, right? And it isn't because that's what you should do in some I know better, or someone knows better for you what you should do sense. It's that's the secret to a meaningful life. And without a meaningful life, then all you have is suffering and nihilism and despair and all of that, and self-contempt, and that's not good. And so it's necessary for men to stand up and take responsibility, and they all know that, and are starving for that message. And the message is more that that's also a good thing, to stand up and take responsibility, because you're cursed so much now from when you're young with this notion that your active engagement with the world is part of what is destroying and undermining the planet and adding to the tyranny of the social systems. It's like, how about not so much of that, hey? Because it's too soul deadening. It's anti-human right to the core. And my sense instead is that, if you were able to reveal the best of yourself to you in the world, that you would be an overwhelming force for good, and that whatever errors might be made along the way would wash out in the works. And that's the other thing that you see in the Abrahamic stories, because Abraham is not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination. He's a real person, and he makes mistakes, but it doesn't matter. The overarching narrative is, maintain your covenant with God, and despite your inadequacies, then not only will you prevail, but your descendants will prevail. It's like, great, that's really good news, So it's been really something to see that in the stories.
On a very regular basis, daily basis, wherever I am now, people come up to me, and it's often men, and tell me the same sort of stories that I laid out in that clip, that they've decided to develop something approximating a vision for their life, and to adopt more responsibility, and to straighten themselves out, and that they can see why that's necessary. Because you can't just do it. You also have to see why it's necessary, because it takes effort to forego immediate gratification and resentment and aggression and short-term status seeking, let's say, to put something away for the future. You have to understand that you have a moral obligation to do that. That's paramount. And partly what I'm trying to do is to provide people with an explanation that carries them through the difficulties. Because I do believe that every person who doesn't bring forth their potential into the world leaves a gap that's filled by something that's not good, and not good for anyone, not good for them, not good for their families, not good for the culture, and it's a real problem. And I believe that is the case for every single person.